Chapter 78. This venerable one's shizun has a nightmare. Chu Wanning and Moran spent the night in the same room. Moran heedlessly fell asleep on the floor in no time. Conversely, Chu Wanning's thoughts were restless and erratic, and he tossed and turned for a long while before he finally dozed off into fitful slumber. His eyes were closed, and he could hear the howling of wind by his ears. Chu Wanning opened his eyes to find himself kneeling in the snow. A dream? Then why did this moment feel so real, as if he had, at some point, actually lived through it? It was the middle of winter. The sky was dark and grey and heavy with clouds that covered the land and stretched to the distant horizon. The snow had piled up past his ankles, freezing the very ground itself, and even the thick cloak draped across his shoulders couldn't stave off the bite of winter. Looking down, he saw a sky-blue cloak lined with fur, sewn with intricate patterns and silver thread. It looked somehow familiar, but between one moment and the next, that feeling slipped away. Chu Wanning tried to get up, unsure of why he was having this manner of harrowing dream. But it was as if his body was not his own. He continued to kneel motionless on the ground. Even when snow covered his shoulders and specks of ice stuck to his eyelashes, his body still showed no intention of moving. The quavering voice of an elderly person came from behind him. "Chu Zongshe, it's getting dark. This Imperial Majesty surely won't see you today. Let's go back." The Chu Wanning in the dream didn't turn around even as footsteps approached, crunching through the snow, and an umbrella appeared above him. Chu Wanning heard himself say, "Thank you, Liu Gong. You're getting on in age, so please head back to the pavilion. I'll be alright here." "Zongshe." The elderly voice seemed to want to continue, but Chu Wanning said, "Go on." The feeble voice sighed, and heavy steps walked a few paces away. Then they turned back around, and the umbrella reappeared over his head. "This old one will keep Zongshe company." Chu Wanning felt his eyes close in the dream, and nothing else was said. It all seemed so strange, this ridiculous dream of his. The words they uttered were absurd, incomprehensible. What was all this, His Imperial Majesty and Liu Gong nonsense? These inner palace phrases had no place in the cultivation world Chu Wanning knew. He tried to take in the scenery of the dream through the lowered lashes of his body. The place looked like Xisheng Peak, but some things were different. The structures were more or less the same, but they were much more lavishly decorated. The corridors surrounding the courtyard were draped with pale violet veils, dotted with embroidered stars, and bells carved into the shape of pearl-holding dragons dangled from the roofs. Clear and crisp jingles danced faintly through the air whenever a gust of wind blew past. He was kneeling, facing the main hall, in front of which a row of guards was stationed, wearing uniforms that he had never seen before. He wondered which sect they were from. The sky gradually darkened, and a line of palace maids, their hair done up in a traditional style, filed out from a side door to light the standing lamps on either side of the palace gate with fair, slender hands. Each lamp was as tall as a person, with 9 layers each, including 49 high-tongue-shaped lamps hanging from the slender copper branches. Candles at the very center of the high tongues glowed brightly, their light scattering on the ground like the starry sky from above, and illuminated the front of the palace with a dazzling radiance. Finished with her task, the head maid shot Chu Wanning a glare. "It's freezing out here tonight," she said, malice in her voice, as she smirked coldly. "Who are you putting on that pitiful act for? His Imperial Majesty and the Empress are currently delighting in their revelries. You can kneel there for as long as you like. No one will care." How impudent. All Chu Wanning's life, no one had ever dared to speak to him like that. He opened his mouth angrily, but although the voice that came out was his own, the words spoken were not. I do not mean to interrupt his leisure, but I truly have important matters to discuss. Please inform him."
"Who do you think you are? Why should I play messenger for you?"
The head maid sneered.
"His Majesty and the Empress are quite enjoying themselves. Who would dare disturb them? If you really want to see His Majesty, you can stay right there. Maybe he'll spare you a glance in the morning."
The old servant behind Chu Wanning couldn't take it anymore, and he spoke up in his wavering voice. "Yes, His Majesty favors your mistress, but shouldn't you still consider to whom you speak? Take at least some care with your words."
"To whom I speak? Who here at Xisheng Peak doesn't know that His Majesty hates him more than anyone? What need is there to be respectful toward him? Bold of a senile old fool to lecture me."
The headmaid's eyes were wide with rage as she called,
"Guards!"
"What do you mean to do?" The feeble old man, back hunched from age, stepped forward to shield Chu Wanning behind himself.
"Extinguish the fire, basins,"
the palace maid said coyly as she glared at him.
"Right away."
The guards immediately went to the basins in the courtyard and put out the fires burning within. Chu Wanning thought to himself that while the maid had a sharp tongue, she wasn't dumb. With the temperature this painfully cold, she had no need to argue with them or directly do anything. She only had to put out the fire, and the courtyard would be as an icy cavern, too cold for even the hardiest individual to tolerate. The night grew deeper, and music and song drifted without cease from the warmly lit palace. Chu Wanning was still kneeling. His legs had gone numb long ago. "Zongshu, go back." The old servant sounded like he was about to sob. "Please go back. Your body can't take this. You know how His Majesty is. If you fall sick, he probably won't even send a physician. You have to take care of yourself." "This ruined body is hardly worth anything," Chu Wanning said softly. "If I can only stop him from attacking Kunlun Tashur Palace, I'm willing to die." "Zongshu, why go to such lengths?" The Chu Wanning in the dream was already greatly weakened. He coughed a few times, but his eyes were clear and bright. "Everything that he is today, all of it is my fault. He couldn't finish speaking before he was overtaken by an alarmingly violent coughing fit. Chu Wanning covered his mouth with his sleeve, tasting iron in his throat. When he pulled his hand away, it was covered in blood, crimson against the snow-white world. "Chu Zongshu!" Chu Wanning still wanted to say something, but black washed over his vision, and he collapsed into the snow, unable to hold on any longer. There was a confused racket by his ear, a sudden chaos. It also seemed very far away, as if separated by layers of fog, oceans apart, and he could barely hear the commotion around him. Hazily, he heard the old servant yelling in a panic, but he could only catch a few scattered words. "Your Imperial Majesty, Your Majesty, please. Chu Zongshu, he can't hold on much longer. Please grant him an audience. This old one will gladly die." The disturbance grew and spread. Footsteps came from all around, lights turned on. The melody of instruments and the sweet voices of songstresses came to an abrupt halt. The palace gates seemed to be flung open, and there was a gust of warm, fragrant air from inside. Chu Wanning felt himself being picked up and brought into the warmth of the palace hall. A large hand touched his forehead, then flinched away as if stung. A low, familiar voice bellowed dangerously. "Why was this venerable one not informed?" No one answered. The man was infuriated, and there was a loud crashing sound of something heavy being smashed. He continued to roar, voice booming like thunder inside the hall. "Are you trying to defy me? He is the master of the Red Lotus Pavilion, this venerable one's shizun, and not a single one of you came to notify this venerable one that he was kneeling outside? Why was this venerable one not informed?" Someone fell to their knees with a thud, quivering all over. It was the head palace maid who had been flouncing about earlier.
"This lowly one deserves death. This lowly one saw that your majesty and the empress were in good spirits and dared not disturb you."
The man paced briskly back and forth a few times, but rather than subsiding, his anger only worsened. His black robes, trimmed with gold, billowed across the floor like a dark cloud before finally stilling, and when he spoke again, his voice was twisted. "His constitution is poor. He can't take the cold. That you made him wait in the snow without informing me, and even put out the fire in the courtyard." His voice shook with rage, and he drew in a deep breath before continuing. The words he spoke next weren't loud, but his tone carried a murderous aura that chilled those present to the bone. "You wanted to kill him." The maid went pale from fright, her head banging repeatedly against the ground until her entire forehead was blue and purple, voice pitching higher through her trembling lips.
No, this lowly one wouldn't dare. Your Majesty, please have mercy, Your Majesty."
"Take her to the platform of sin and virtue for execution."
Your Majesty, Your Majesty."
The shrill voice scratched along the insides of his ears like blood-red nails as the dreamscape began to shake and fall apart amidst her terrified shrieking. The scene scattered and disintegrated like the drift of snowflakes. "Do you have any idea how much effort it took this venerable one to drag him back from the gates of death? Aside from this venerable one, no one is allowed to harm so much as a hair on his head." That hoarse voice was perfectly calm, but that very calmness framed the frightening madness beneath. Chu Wanning felt that person come closer and stop in front of him. A hand gripped his jaw. Blearily, he opened his eyes, trying to get a look at him. Under the bright, dazzling lights, he saw a blurry face with strong, pitch-black brows, a straight nose, and eyes dark like the black set satin, with a faint tinge of purple in the light of the candle. "Moran?" "Shizun!" Suddenly, a voice called to him in sharp definition. Chu Wanning's eyes flew open. He was still lying in the room at the inn. It was still dark outside, and a lone candle flickered on the table. Moran was sitting at the edge of the bed, with one hand pressed against Chu Wanning's forehead and the other braced on the bed, looking at him worriedly. "What did I?" Chu Wanning felt all out of sorts. The dream had been far too real, and for a while he couldn't quite break out of his daze. "You had a nightmare. You were shaking so much," Moran said as he tucked his blanket around him. "You looked like you were freezing. I was worried you might be running a fever, but thankfully not." Chu Wanning uttered a quiet, "Oh," and turned to look out of the slightly opened window. The sky was yet dark outside, the night yet deep. "It was snowing in my dream," he murmured, then said no more. He sat up, burying his face in one hand and taking a moment to steady himself before exhaling slowly. "Must have been overtired. I'll go make some ginger tea for you." Moran gazed worriedly at the paleness of his face. "Shizun, you look terrible." Chu Wanning did not respond. Faced with this lack of reply, Moran sighed and, without really thinking, instinctively pressed his own forehead against Chu Wanning's cold, sweat-drenched brow. "If you don't say anything, I'll take that as a yes." Startled by the sudden closeness, Chu Wanning reflexively leaned backward a little. Moran, also not quite awake, offhandedly stroked Chu Wanning's hair like he had in his past life. Then he pulled on his outer robe and went downstairs to borrow the kitchen. A little while later, he returned with a wooden tray. Moran wasn't heartless. Chu Wanning had rushed to Peach Blossom Springs to save him, and had also gone to great lengths to protect him. No matter how much resentment he'd harbored toward this person, for the time being, he was grateful. The tray bore a pot of steaming ginger tea and a small jar of brown sugar. Moran knew that while Chu Wanning didn't like things with overly strong flavors, he was quite fond of sweet foods. Besides the ginger tea, he had also brought a mantu from the kitchen, which he had sliced into thin pieces, soaked in fresh milk, then fried until crispy before finishing them off with a sprinkling of powdered sugar to make for a plate of simple light snacks. Color gradually returned to Chu Wanning's face as he held a cup of ginger tea in both hands and sipped slowly from it. He picked up a piece of the sweet, crispy mantu between porcelain white fingertips and contemplated it for a while. "What's this?" "I just threw something together. It doesn't have a name yet." Moran scratched his head. Chu Wanning disliked fried foods, thinking them greasy, but on hearing the word sweet, he held one to his lips and hesitatingly took a small bite. "Is it good?" Moran asked experimentally. Chu Wanning glanced at him and said nothing, but he picked up another piece to eat with the ginger tea. The pot of tea and plateful of snacks quickly disappeared, and in this warmth the remnants of the nightmare also dissipated like smoke. Chu Wanning yawned and lay down once more. "I'm going back to sleep." "Hang on." Moran lifted his hand to wipe the corner of Chu Wanning's lips. "You've got some crumbs there." Chu Wanning did not reply. That open smile on Moran's face made his ears feel a little warm despite himself. He turned his face away with a soft sound of assent and paid him no more heed. Moran collected the dishes and went downstairs to return them. When he came back, he saw Chu Wanning lying on his side, facing the wall, perhaps already asleep. He walked up and quietly put down the curtain, at which point Chu Wanning spoke. "It's cold at night. Don't sleep on the floor anymore." Then Chu Wanning, with his long eyelashes lowered, truly wanted Moran to stay. However, the words, "sleep up here," wouldn't come out, even as the tips of his ears kept getting warmer and warmer. He cared for Moran, and so didn't want him sleeping on the floor, but he also liked him and didn't want him to leave. Chu Wanning's face was terribly thin, and he knew all too well that even if he did manage to get out the words, he would surely be rejected. Then both his veneer and dignity would be forfeit. Even thinking about it made him feel pathetic. Things had been so much easier as Shia Sini. Little ones were allowed to be a bit willful. Yet Moran had been good to him today. He'd even remembered that Chu Wanning liked a lot of brown sugar in his ginger tea. Was it acceptable for him to think that, maybe, Moran did actually care for him a little bit? The thought made Chu Wanning's chest warm, and in a hot-headed moment, he blurted out, "Come sleep up here." "I'll go see if they're done yet, and if so, I'll return to my own room." Chu Wanning and Moran spoke at practically the same time. Moran didn't fully process his shizun's words until after he had finished speaking himself. His eyes widened slightly when he did. "Sounds good." Chu Wanning concurred instantly, as if rushing to cover up what he had said. "Go on." "Shizun, you..." "I'm tired. You can leave." "All right. Rest well, Shizun." Moran left, the door creaking open and then shut. In the darkness, Chu Wanning opened his eyes. His heart raced in his chest and his palms were covered with sweat, humiliated by his loss of self-control. He really had been alone for too long, if he could really mistake a tiny sliver of kindness and care from someone for sincere tenderness, like an idiot. Irritated, he turned over and buried his face in his pillow, where he sank into a bottomless pit of self-loathing. He was well aware that Moran liked Chi Mingjing, and that there was nothing between himself and Moran but for the polite distance of master and disciple. And yet, the person from his dream appeared unbidden in his mind. The same exact face, only older. The way he had looked at Chu Wanning with a surly expression and eyes too deep to read. With a creak, the door opened again. Chu Wanning froze, his entire back going stiff like a bow stretched taut. Someone came over to his bed. There was a moment of silence, then he felt that person sit at the edge, bringing with him the light scent of freshly laundered clothes. "Shizun, are you asleep?" No response. So Moran continued, voice even, like he was discussing the weather. "They're still at it." He chuckled softly and lay down next to Chu Wanning, with his head propped up on one arm, gaze sweeping over his shizun's back, as it very obviously and visibly tensed several degrees further. Is Shizun's offer from earlier still open? Chu Wanning did not reply. Shizun sure likes to ignore people. If Shizun doesn't say anything, I'll take it as a yes again. Moran's eyes lit with pleasure, purple-black and flickering with amusement at the cold humph that came from the other side of the bed. If doting on Chimay was his habit, then teasing his Shizun was a game he never tired of. He never could figure out just what it was that he felt toward Chu Wanning. All he knew was that this person made his heart itch, made him want to bare his fangs and bite him until he started either crying or laughing, although either was, for the most part, wishful thinking. But whenever that face, ever cool and impassive, showed the slightest bit of emotion because of Moran, he found himself becoming fervently excited. Shizun? Nothing. Just felt like saying it. Chu Wanning didn't bother replying. Shizun? If you have something to say, out with it. If not, shut up. Moran laughed, then suddenly thought of something and asked, half joking and half serious. I was thinking that Shiashidi and Shizun really are incredibly alike. Shizun, is he your son? A long, long silence. Chu Wanning had endured far too much emotional turmoil for one night, and he was in a sulky mood. Suddenly getting made fun of like this, he couldn't help feeling irritated. I was just messing with Shizun. Don't mind. Yes. Chu Wanning answered coolly. He's my son. Moran was still grinning. Oh, that's what I figured. So he's your son. Wait, son? Moran's eyes flew wide open, as if he'd been struck by lightning, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Son? Chu Wanning rolled over and pinned Moran with a deadpan gaze, his face thoroughly serious and without the slightest hint of jest. Chu Wanning had blundered too much tonight and feared that his facade might not hold. If Moran wanted to make this joke, he might as well take the chance to muddy the waters. Chu Wanning would do whatever it took to ensure that Moran didn't realize that he liked him. As Chu Wanning thought this, he calmly picked up the pieces of his dignity that he had dropped and said with all seriousness, Shiasini is my illegitimate child, even if he doesn't know this. As of right now, this is a secret known to the heavens, the earth, you, and me. If a third person were to find out, I would utterly end you. Moran was struck, absolutely, completely, totally dumb.